I'm going to show you 6 do's and don'ts for becoming a great conversationalist. This is part 1 in a 4-part series on how to have a great conversation with virtually anyone. I'll put links to the entire series once they're all posted in the description below this video. Here we're going to explain why we want to have good conversations in the first place, and then we'll look at the top 3 do's and the top 3 don'ts of conversations. By the way, if you're interested in communication skills, leadership development, and public speaking, you can take a look at the free page on my website. There's a free class there, free downloads, and other resources. There's a link to that in the description below the video. Why should we even care about having good conversations in the first place? What's the point, you might ask? We have conversations to learn about others, about ourselves, and learn about the world. But usually the goal for many people in conversations is to connect with each other. We do that by looking for common ground, looking for ways to transcend the real or perceived differences between us. Ultimately, good conversations weave the fabric of our relationships. The reason I'm mentioning the overall point of conversations is that it's easy to get confused about that in this day and age. Many people assume they're having conversations for other reasons, like to get something from another person, to extract something they have that you want. And that's not at all what this series is about. I want to be upfront that our goal for this series is about good conversations so we can learn, connect, find common ground, and build relationships. That's the prerequisite assumption I make about conversations in this series. Or as one of my friends once mispronounced it when he was talking to a college professor, it's a prerequisite. With those goals in mind, here are 3 don'ts. These are conversation killers that you should avoid. First, avoid one-upping the other person in conversations. Some of us, maybe you, can get so competitive that we even see conversations as an arena for competition. If something great happened to the other person, you might want to reply that something even better happened to you. If they took a vacation to Florida, you might feel tempted to mention that you took a vacation to Europe or some other extra luxurious place. Sometimes people even compete for who has it worse. You broke your wrist, well, I broke my leg in 5 places. The trouble with one-upping is that it feels like you're making a power move or a status move in the conversation to put yourself above them. And that's not a great way to have a conversation and make a human connection. If you're casting the other person as subordinate to you, that's the opposite of finding common ground. Instead of competing and one-upping, empathize. Enter the other person's joy. If they're having some good celebration in their life, enter that celebration with them. Be a good listener. Don't feel the need to compete. The second conversation killer is chronic complaining. Now, granted, we don't always have a good day, and it's okay to be authentic and honest. Complaining once in a while is fine. So if complaining is your go-to approach, then don't be surprised if people seem like they want to avoid you. Now, the key antidote for chronic complaining is a mindset of gratefulness. When you start the day thinking about, let's say, 3 things that you're really grateful for, it will change your outlook for the entire day, and you can bring that into conversations. The third conversation killer is monologuing. This means you're talking at the other person with a long talking turn that flows in a one-way direction. When I was growing up, we called them motor mouths, and we all knew 1 or 2 of them. I have another video about how to interrupt a long-winded person, and those skills can come in really handy. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. But the point of this video is not to do it yourself. One of the most common mistakes that people make, for example, is they think the way to have a good conversation is by showing off their gift of the gab, telling long stories about themselves and oversharing. As I've said in other videos, this does not feel like a gift to the listener. The one-way monologue makes other people feel trapped. There are other conversation killers out there, but these are the top 3. And you'll notice that the 3 conversational don'ts have one common theme. They all sit on the foundation of self-centeredness. All these are really about ourselves, not about the other person. And that's why they're conversation killers, because it's not a good conversation if it only involves one person's world. Now let's swap that unhelpful philosophy and talk about how to start conversations on the right foot. Here are 3 conversational do's or conversation sustainers. And you'll notice that these are all other-centered behaviors. First, you must start your conversation with a high-quality, appropriate greeting. Don't skip the greeting. It's crucial. As my co-author Julian Miravel and I say in our book, Positive Communication for Leaders, a good greeting signals to the other person that you're open to a conversation. In contrast, simply sitting there waiting for somebody else to have a conversation with you is too passive. A good greeting is about taking initiative. As Julian Miravel says, it's about moving toward other people. A good greeting starts with words like hello, and you should say the person's name once and ask them a question about how they're doing. And use good nonverbal cues like eye contact and a warm facial expression. A good greeting also starts with a bit of small talk. As I understand it, in England, one of the ways to signal that they're interested in having a conversation and test to see if the other person is open is they make a comment or ask a short question about the weather. If the other person answers and talks openly about the weather, that signals to everybody involved that they're generally open to a conversation. That's what conversational initiative looks like. And I think similar norms apply here in the United States where I'm from. So start with a warm greeting, easy question, and a bit of small talk. If you do it right, these initial moments of a conversation should feel invitational. The second conversation sustainer is to get curious about the other person. I'm talking about a genuine interest you have in other people. When we get curious about people, we are deliberately being other-centered. And of everybody I know on the entire planet, I have to say that my wife of over 20 years is one of the most naturally curious people I've ever met. When she meets new people, she really wants to know what their life is like. She cares about other people and how they're doing. It's probably one of the reasons she's such a successful mental health therapist. She loves learning about people. And you can do the same thing. Remind yourself that you're there to take an interest in other people in part. This frees you from wanting anything back from them in the conversation. As a consequence of making it about the other person, you get much more back in return from them during the conversation in terms of their openness. It's like giving a gift. They say it's better to give gifts than receive gifts, and it's the same way when we're in conversations. The third conversation sustainer is to establish a pattern of dialogue, not monologue, like we mentioned earlier. You want to strive for at least a 50-50 conversational back and forth. Aim for approximately equal exchange between you, 50% of your time listening and 50% of your time talking. The best way to do that is start the conversation by listening and put most of your talking in the second half. But here's a tip within a tip. Even though I'm saying strive for 50-50 back and forth, a client of mine who's also very skilled at communication said he doesn't see that good conversations are really 50% about them and 50% about you. He sees it more like 50% of the time listening to them, 25% of your time talking about their interests, and the other 25% talking about your common ground with them. That last 25% is where you talk about yourself, essentially. This is a very other-centered mindset, and it will work wonders to get your good conversations rolling along. People love it when others take a genuine interest in them. You can also achieve this 50-50 balance more naturally by taking what we call short talking turns. In other words, when you talk, don't let your talking turn get too drawn out. Take a short talking turn and then pitch it back to the other person. Short talking turns on your side of the conversation open the possibility for a satisfying back and forth exchange because you create more room for the other person to contribute, more space for a natural flow. In this spirit, the conversation should feel like a friendly game of tennis where you each cooperatively volley the ball over the net. You're not trying to win the game for yourself or score a point. It's more like when you first started tennis or a similar game. The goal is to both just keep the ball going back and forth as many times over the net as you can by working together. That's the conversational pattern that you're looking for that makes everybody happy. Here's a summary of part 1 of the series, the 3 conversation killers and 3 conversation sustainers. This is both a mindset and also concrete foundational behaviors that will set you up for success. In part 2 of this series, I'll show you how to ask good questions to get the conversation rolling along with momentum. Until then, thanks, God bless, see you soon.